Welcome to Good Game, the show for gamers by gamers. I'm Hex.
And I'm Barger.
Gaming season is definitely upon us, and this week we're checking out Borderlands 2.
Can I kill everything with one shot yet?
Plus robots, pandas, and logwomen. You know what that means, Hex?
I do.
Tekken Tag Tournament 2 time.
Plus, Goose investigates how games are trying to tell better stories.
But first, can you guess the game for this week?
What's that?
What?
It's news time.
Good game.
A patent filed by Microsoft has revealed a device that can turn an entire room into a playable screen. The patent for the immersive display experience outlines a device known as the environmental display that projects beyond the TV to wrap around the room's interior. The projector would work in conjunction with a depth camera to map the room and adjust the projection based on furniture and the room's dimensions, blending items into the display. A Kinect would also be used to track the user's eyes and determine where they are looking, as well as to avoid projecting the image into their eyes. 2 employees from Arma developer Bohemia Interactive have been arrested on the Greek island of Lemnos and charged with espionage. The developers were allegedly photographing and videotaping a military base on the island, which is an illegal offence carrying a possible 20-year sentence. Bohemia Interactive has claimed the employees were simply on holiday to Lemnos, an island that has been announced as a location in the upcoming Arma 3 game. Chris Roberts, the creator of classic games Wing Commander Privateer, is returning to game development after a 10-year hiatus. Roberts had left the games industry to produce films such as Lord of War and The Punisher. However, the announcement of a new studio, Cloud Imperium Games, revealed he has already been working on a new game for over a year.
Is that the official line?
30 Flights of Loving is the latest indie title to catch our eye, and it's brought to us by Blendo Games, a developer starting out the way that so many have, working for a big-name publisher, finding themselves out of work, and then Blendo was born.
Yes, Brendan Chung is the mastermind behind a bunch of these quirky titles, but before we get to this game, I thought we could go back and talk about Gravity Bone, which was made previously to this. Even though 30 Flights of Loving is technically the prequel to Gravity Bone, I found when I played 30 Flights, I was a little bit confused, so I feel like playing Gravity Bone first gives it a bit of context.
Good idea.
In Gravity Bone, you arrive at some kind of swinging party in what I can only assume is a fancy mountain chalet. You make your way through a crowd of well-dressed partygoers with no real aim or objective available to you until, after a bit of snooping, you come across a secret spy case with a waiter's disguise and the instruction to deliver a drink to a man with red hair.
It's all very cool 60s spy film, isn't it? And the art style reminds me a lot of those 3D papercraft models that you can build out of paper and cardboard.
Yeah, or maybe what a Bond game would look like if it was set in the Minecraft world.
Yeah, but there's a definite flair to its simplicity that gives it a well-designed finish.
Gravity Bone is only about 15 minutes long, but before the end you'll do a bit of platforming and participate in a thrilling chase sequence. The game is free and a brilliant little experience if you're after a quick distraction. And best of all, it leaves you wondering what just went down and wanting more. With the follow-up title 30 Flights of Loving, we get just that.
Yes, but this time around, your adventure is a little more abstract. Like in Gravity Bone, you begin the game without any explanation or instruction, but arrive in what seems to be a small bar.
You can discern from signs around you that you're in some kind of Prohibition-era setting, but that's about it.
And oddly, you can pick up numerous items, just like in the last game, but you can't use them or access them. They have no purpose other than to be taken. And then it starts to click that this is actually the game's storytelling device. It's getting you to play out those actions to tell a story.
Your first puzzle is simply finding your way out of the first room. And once you figure that out, the rest of the game is kind of a whirlwind experience. I was a lot less sure of what was happening in 30 Flights. I mean, I knew I was involved in some kind of heist. There was a plane and guns, and each of my cohorts seemed to have their own set of special abilities, which I assume made up some kind of elite group. But all the events happened in some really strange order.
Yeah, there's no real gameplay once you get out of that first room. It is simply playing out the game's narrative. But I found it so interesting the way they jumped around the timeline. A lot of what happens seems to be either just after or just before an event. But I just love that cutting and the way it jolted forward. It was a shock to the senses.
The effect is dizzying, but I agree, fast-paced and exciting as well. I'm just not sure what was going on, even after I went back and played through it a second time. And what was with all the cats?
Love the cats.
What's going on? Where do these cats come from? What is this game about? What is happening to me?
I don't know why those cats were there either, but I'm glad they were, Hex. Despite not having much to actually do in 30 Flights, there are some beautiful visual moments here. I love the use of color and perspective, and I just love the way that the pacing would give you moments of pause until you figured out what you needed to do and then suddenly jolt you.
What?
I'm not sure that I would call this a game, but it's one of those experiences where you are left with a lot of questions at the end. But I had a really good time with this one.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I mean, the key for me with these kinds of experiences is that I need to feel like I'm involved. I mean, gameplay doesn't have to be hard if it wants to focus on storytelling or a message, but I need to feel like I'm doing something.
You push the duck off?
I pushed the duck off. In Gravity Bone, the narrative was much clearer. I had some minor objectives to complete, and that made me feel way more connected to what was happening.
I enjoyed Gravity Bone. I thought it was a cool idea and they did it well, so I'm giving that 8 out of 10 rubber chickens. 30 Flights of Loving I liked a lot more than you, I think, Hex, and even though I felt it's a little bit overpriced, it's just so different from everything else we play, so I'm giving it 7.5.
Gravity Bone was definitely my favourite of the two, if anything for that epic chase sequence, and I had much more of an emotional response to the ending, so I'm giving it 8. 30 Flights of Loving, it had a story to tell, I'm just not sure what it was. So I'm giving it 6.5.
When it comes to gaming, I feel like storytelling is the one thing that's always just lagging a little bit behind everything else.
And on that topic, this week Goose investigates how games have evolved as a medium for storytelling.
What a coincidence, because we were just talking about that.
I know.
Good game.
Once upon a time, there were games that didn't even have stories. But over the years, we've seen the medium of video games really mature, and so too are the ways in which some of these stories are told.
I want to take you on a journey back. I want you to remember occasions that made you laugh, times that made you smile.
Certainly we can say not all games are narrative. There's certainly plenty of games that are just puzzles and work fantastically well on their own, and any sense of story is in the way the person plays. But we certainly know that audiences like narrative, they engage with narrative. It's wired into our DNA, so it makes sense that we are enlivened by complex narrative in gameplay.
So what are the elements that make a great story? Surprise, anticipation. How do you keep an audience on the edge of their seat so that they want to stay tuned to see what happens next? But then you've got the key things like a great character, often a complex character with a flaw and something that they have to overcome. Great antagonists. If you think of a character having a goal and the obstacles that thwart that character in achieving that goal. But I also think what's important in telling a great story is the possibility of change.
Your state of mind is important, Way. It's important to me, it's important to how you do your job.
Specifically for a game, you absolutely must marry design and story goals. If those two things don't come together, your game will be lacking somehow.
In the case of some of the most compelling stories told in video games, at the end of the journey, both the player and the main character should be left with this intense feeling of transformation, something that's incredibly unique to the medium of video games.
My whole goal is to empower players to tell their own story. I always describe it as telling a story with the player as opposed to the player. And a lot of what I see out there now is not so much exploiting what makes games unique and different and wonderful. It's about making games more like movies, or making games that tell a story in their cinematic moments, but then it's just something completely divorced from that in the actual gameplay.
Somehow, I didn't think he was about to tell me I'd won the lottery.
Most games are really based on adrenaline and skills and the fact that you can press the right buttons as quickly as possible and develop some technique. But I don't see games as a sport. I see, at least not the games I make, I see them as an emotion simulator in many ways. I mean, it's a way to emulate whatever can happen to you, the good things and the bad things, except it's just a simulator. It's not for real. but make you believe it's for real. That's my challenge.
Today, the way in which developers approach storytelling in games is as varied as games themselves.
If you think of a game like Half-Life 2, we get the first big game that doesn't have any cutscenes.
Dr. Freeman, I presume.
So they've had to find a way to tell the story in a complex world without having to give us a cutscene. And I think it's very interesting that they solved the problem in Half-Life 2 the same way Jane Austen solved her problem in Pride and Prejudice hundreds of years earlier. Pride and Prejudice is also it's a first-person shooter. We see everything through Lizzie Bennet's eyes. Jane Austen solves the problem by creating letters, all these third-person letters that get written to her and about her, which allow us to see the bigger world and the context and the stakes that are coming for her. Half-Life 2 does the same thing. They go, if we can't have cutscenes to show this bigger world, how else do we do it? We get Dr. Breen and his voiceovers. We get the telescreens that are telling us things about the news, constant news reports. So they just found another way.
Portal is about the gun and the way that it works, the portal gun in Portals. So the plot is about that. And Journey is about the way you connect with someone else on this journey. And Assassin's Creed is about freedom, about climbing buildings and going everywhere. And the concepts the game deals with are about those issues.
2010's Heavy Rain made the story the central focus of the game.
A game like Heavy Rain is a really important moment, not necessarily because it's a good game and it created a certain polemic debate about whether it was good or not, but it was certainly a moment to say, hang on, here's seriously complex, rich, detailed and carefully built storytelling in an interactive form. Do we want it? And I think by the mere fact that it was made and there was a lot of talk about it, said that people were open to the idea that games needed or could have better stories to be more satisfying.
The game seemed to resonate with many, many people, especially with women, in a very strange way. You wouldn't believe how many guys we meet telling me, oh, I played Heavy Rain with my wife and we played the game. This is the only game we ever played together and she loved it.
Where's Jason?
Here. So that's great. I'm really proud of that because I think that women are probably more clever than we are. I mean, we can stay in front of the screen for hours shooting at zombies or monsters, but they can't because they need something deeper and something more emotional and something more interesting for them.
Oh, no, 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 no!
I did what was necessary!
You don't get to make that call!
I think that storytelling in games still has a long way to go, which I'm glad for, because it means we can evolve and go places I can't even envision. And that we have so much room to affect people.
I think we've proven we're capable to do games that can move me emotionally like a film can move me. I've cried in games, I've had heart in my mouth in games, I've cringed at games, played games so scary I hid under my bed. Scarier than any horror film I've ever seen. So we're there on an emotional level. What we now need to do is just make sure we're doing more of it and that we continue to see where it can go. And that's no different to filmmaking, it's no different from radio drama, it's no different from stage plays or painting or art. This continual process of maturity, of finding where else it can be.
Good game.
Thanks, Goose. Well, it's time to crack our knuckles again and throw down some fisticuffs in Tekken Tag Tournament 2. We enjoyed the game, we reviewed it in the arcade earlier this year, but now it's time to see how this brawler performs in the living room.
This game looks good. Not Street Fighter good, but it's had an extreme makeover since Tekken 6, which was a bit of a car wreck, to be honest. There's a lot more detail in the backgrounds and the character models as well, and this put me in a good mood right from the get-go, Hex, as we started our biffo.
Yes, and with more than 50 brawlers, this is by far the biggest Tekken roster yet. And in the short term, you'll have lots of fun mixing and matching. Okay.
All right.
We went with an ogre and a robot versus the devil and a grizzly bear. Classic matchup.
Fight!
Take it, take it, take it, take it, take
Oh,
it! Yes! Tentacle arm.
Oh man, smash me. Okay, Bear's got this serious business.
Oh, you're humping me.
I think you'll find it's backbreaking because Bear's backbreak. But after the novelty wears off, the characters in Tekken do feel a bit gimmicky. But hey, if you've been looking for a fighting game with a velociraptor that has a spinning Olympic athlete on its head, then this might be the game for you.
Yeah, it's definitely got no competition where that's concerned, but it does have some stiff competition from other tag team games. Tekken may have started the tag genre over a decade ago with the original tag tournament, but mashup titles like Marvel vs. Capcom have brought the subgenre a long way since then. Tekken does have all the de facto tag options covered though. There are tag combos where both of your fighters partner up monster attacks, and 4 players can control all of the tag combatants too.
KO. You lose.
I found the tag mechanic pretty solid.
Yeah, what impressed me most about it was the way that they balanced it with solo play. You can actually take on 2 other enemies with one character who just has double health, and I think that's a clever mechanic, and I don't think I've seen that before.
I also thought the training mode was a lot better than most. You're taken through a series of challenges, teaching you to master basic dodge attacks and attacking techniques. That's so much better than the normal pages of command lists. Also, I saw way more of that robot than I wanted to. Anything you're not keen on, apart from that?
I struggled with the juggle hex. I like a good air juggle. It's fun combat, but being on the receiving end of a big juggle here can wipe half your health, and it's inherently frustrating.
KO. You lose.
Also the boss fight. So we beat the first guy, who is just 7 feet of pure muscle and pain.
KO. You win.
Job done, we thought, and then this happened.
Final round. Fight.
And then this.
KO.
And then this happened.
Round 2.
4 bosses, and those last 2 just juggle you into oblivion in seconds. I like good hard boss fights at the end of a fighter, but I just felt like these guys were too cheap, and that was infuriating.
Yeah, but I think when it comes down to it, the single player mode really is just for practicing and unlocking characters. I mean, the multiplayer is the real focus of any fighter.
I know, but there's no reason why fighters can't have strong single-player campaigns, and I feel like they're always an afterthought or just kind of tacked on. Other genres that are multiplayer-focused do it well, like shooters. They always have or at least try to have a strong single-player campaign, and I'm also a bit worried that Tekken is painting itself into a corner where only the pro players are going to enjoy their game.
You lose. Game over.
Yeah, I guess it's a fair point. I mean, Tekken's focus on memorizing button combos makes it one of the least accessible games for newcomers and casual players. But, you know, for good or bad, Tekken seems to be very much focused on serving its fan base, and it's by far the best Tekken yet, so I'm giving it 7.5.
I think the series needs to evolve to survive, so I'm giving it 5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Continue. Good game.
The original Borderlands was a wonderful surprise, a striking art style, tight mechanics, and so much loot that it became more than just a one-player affair for many.
And it had one of the best intro songs to a game ever. But it wasn't without its faults. The enemy AI wasn't very interesting, and also I remember so many skags, heck, so many.
But we're back for more lootin' and shootin' with this sequel, and with that comes more diverse and varied environments and enemy types, better guns, and even a half-decent story to tie it all together.
And barely any skags.
This ain't no place for no hero. This ain't no place for no better man. This ain't no place for no hero. Oh,
There are 4 all-new characters to choose from. Salvador the Gun Zerker is the no-nonsense option, with his ability letting you dual-wield and regen ammo and health.
Fistfuls of hate!
Maya the Siren can phase-lock enemies, trapping them in mid-air. Axton the Commando can bust out turrets. And finally, Zero the Assassin can go invisible and create a decoy of himself.
There's also a 5th class coming out called the Macromancer, and we couldn't test that out because it's coming later as DLC, and it's designed for gamers who don't play first-person shooters a lot.
Yes, now if you're up to speed with the controversy surrounding that, you may have read Borderlands developer John Hemingway saying this: "I want to make, for the lack of a better term, the girlfriend skill tree. This is, I love Borderlands and I want to share it with someone, but they suck at first-person shooters."
We recently spoke to executive producer on Borderlands 2, Randy Pitchford, for his take on those comments.
The skill in question If you miss and the bullets hit the ground or hit the wall, there's a chance that they'll reflect and hit the enemy. Imagine then I can use this skill and you know, have my grandfather play split screen with me. Now, the fact that my particular grandfather is not good at first-person shooters, is that an indictment against all grandfathers? Of course not. Of course not. And the design of the skill, it is not biased towards any gender or any age or any race or any sexual orientation. And in fact, in my worldview and in, you know, I like to think the philosophy of the entire studio, discrimination is horrible. I think what happened was Jonathan was talking about his own girlfriend who happens to be a non-gamer. Now again, is that an indictment against all girlfriends? Of course not. That's ludicrous. That is ludicrous. And in fact, when you think about what the intent behind the design of this character is, you kind of want a guy like Jonathan on the team of design because he's actually thinking about inclusiveness, right? He's actually like, and that's one of the things that frustrated me so much. And I think it's kind of dishonest because there were a lot of journalists there that day, and all of them talked about the skills of the Mechromancer and how cool this character was. But one journalist decided to take a quote and kind of manipulating it, knowing that the readers would imagine, that guy's a sexist, and get controversy about that. And that's dishonest.
And you can see that full interview on the website.
Set 5 years after the first game, after the vault opened, the Hyperion Corporation have moved in to harvest all of the iridium floating around Pandora. But they've also found a second, bigger vault, which the boss of Hyperion, Handsome Jack, is pretty keen on getting into.
At first I groaned when I heard this, Hex. Another vault, way to recycle the story. But it actually was a premature groan because the story is worth paying attention to here. You'll meet up with lots of familiar faces from the first game and join their resistance to stop Hyperion and Handsome Jack from getting to the vault.
Well done! Your ability to walk short distances without dying will be Handsome Jack's downfall.
I love the humor in this game, Hex. It's genuinely funny, and that story had all sorts of twists and turns too.
Yeah, and the characters have been brought to life with solid cutscenes and really expressive animations.
You'll never take me alive, you robotic son bitch!
Enemies shout out some great lines, and some of the characters you meet are delightfully insane.
All around the stack, this plant, the stalker chased the bandit. The stalker thought 'twas all in fun. Pop! Goes the bandit.
Hex, there's something about a completely deranged world that's just fun to be in.
Yes, but it's all icing on the cake, however, because Borderlands is all about one thing: guns. Lots of guns.
Heaps.
Love my little pistol.
Yes, it's an endless drip feed of crazier and crazier weapons, and almost as soon as you found a favorite, you'll stumble upon something else and toss old Yeller to the side like it meant nothing to you. It's fun experimenting with all these different weapons, and that keeps you in the game somewhat. Also, that hit registration is so good. Every bullet goes exactly where you think it will. And all those critical hits and numbers flying off, it's quite rewarding gunplay.
Yeah, I also think the AI does a much better job of keeping on your toes too. They jump around and throw things at you, take cover, flank, and make sure you never stop moving. There's also heaps of explosive barrels scattered around the environment now, but they're not your usual red barrels because they're filled with elemental substances. There's electric barrels, toxic barrels, and the new element slag, which boosts the damage of every kind of damage other than slag. Having this barrel variety makes them much more integral to combat because they're just so useful.
Yeah, I like the variety of the enemies here too. Old foes return, joined by a heap of new ones from bullymongs, mechs, stalkers, threshers, and these crystal-y things. And each of these have variations. Some are on fire or spit acid, or are just bigger badass versions. And this variation means you'll constantly be employing new strategies to take down enemies and exploit their exploits.
Bats? No one said anything about bats!
Although just generally shooting them a lot works as well.
We've been powering through the main story missions and ignoring most of the side quests, but from what we've played so far, in general the missions are just more interesting. There's still the odd collect 'em up in there, but otherwise they've done a good job of keeping things to the point and shaking that MMO-ish grinding from the quests.
I'm gonna need their badonkadonks first, and they got stole by the bandits a few days ago. Go get them!
I know it's unusual to mention Guild Wars 2 here, but after playing that where you didn't have to hand in any quests, to this where you have to go back to all the quest givers and hand it in, I genuinely found that frustrating. It's like something has switched in my mind. I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah, but handing in quests is an adventure staple.
Hello, mercenary person. I have money and a problem.
It's time for the staples to change, Hex.
One of those psychos ran off with the power core.
Just send an email. Done it.
Shame. I love to watch you work.
After the last game, I was a bit worried that the locations wouldn't vary enough, Barjo. I mean, that game was very brown. It was a brown time for games in general, but this time I think they've really done a good job of making sure that it keeps fresh and vibrant and different.
Yeah, and there's some pretty cool areas, like this toxic goo-filled cave, a big shiny city, and a lush green valley with rivers and waterfalls. And everything feels much bigger too, which is impressive considering how big the last game felt.
Yeah, plus we've been playing on a good PC with all the settings cranked to high, and I've got to say, I loved it, Badge. I don't think I've ever spent so much time just shooting fabric.
Hex, I had physics-gasms. The way it all shreds and falls apart, and the way liquid pools slosh around with explosions. And those singularity grenades are just pure awesome.
It's a scientific fact.
All of these effects do make the big fights chug a bit, but still, rah!
The driving felt better too. Just vehicles were weightier and I don't know, they just felt more attached to the world. Plus the larger environments meant there's less of those frustrating bits to get stuck on.
And the vehicles are big enough for everyone in the party to jump onto as well, which is good. And this game really is the most fun in co-op.
This is my car. Oops.
But if you do play with friends, it is good to play with someone at the same level, otherwise someone ends up not having much fun.
Yeah, I mean, if you join a higher level player's game, you end up just spending the whole time trying not to die and picking up loot that you can't use yet. Dying.
Dying. Save us, Gog.
Although you do level up much quicker if you can survive. On the subject of leveling, in addition to your usual earning of XP and skill points, there's also a new badass rank. This goes up as you complete challenges like shoot 1,000 bullets or kill X number of enemies.
And as it ranks up, you also gain tokens, which can be spent on upgrading things like accuracy, health, reload rate, and just about every stat. There's small upgrades though, 1% here or 0.5% there, but essentially you'll keep earning these forever, and they start to stack up pretty quickly. It's just another way to customize your character, and this game is very good at doing that. What are you going to give it, Hex?
It's pretty hard to fault, really. Superb combat, unique level design, and just hours and hours worth of fun to be had here. I'm giving it 9.
Yeah, it's the perfect sequel, isn't it? They just took everything and expanded and made it bigger and polished and tightened up, so I'm going to give it 9 out of 10 as well.
Do you remember after all those skags, we took on the giant Skag King?
Ah, the Skag King. From memory, I shot him in the balls.
I believe you did, yes.
Those are the days, Hex. How times have changed.
Good game.
Did you guess the game for this week? It was The Way of the Exploding Fist from 1985. First released on the Commodore 64, it was developed by local devs Beam Software and set the style for many fighting games that came after it. So well received at the time of release, it won Game of the Year at the Golden Joystick Awards. Next week, Rocksmith. We've been rocking out all week.
Well, I wouldn't say that we've been rocking out exactly.
I think we rocked. I think if you believe in your heart that we rocked, then we rocked.
Right, 13, 13, 13. Too late. What song is this? I can't even tell. Just play anything.
Hang on, here we go, here we go, here we go.
The people in the audience look really bored.
It's not just the audience.
And big news, Barjo, the Android version of the Good Game app has finally hit the Play Store, and it's free, of course.
And it has swipe carousel technology. Sexy.
And some hidden secrets.
Yes. And over on ABC3 on Spawn Point this weekend, we have a look at the Vita version of Little Big Planet. So until then, gamers, Barjo out.
Hex out. Are you going to show me the carousel? The
Check it out.
Carousel
Check it out.
technology.
Oh, hang on. What have I done? Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's very swish.
Look at that carouseling.
Let's watch a review.
No, carousel.